When Kate and I moved to Tampa Bay, we were so excited. It was a new city, a new start, and more sunshine than our pasty Michigan skid can handle. But I'll be honest, we got a few things wrong. And if we had to do it all over again, there are some decisions we'd make very differently. And if you're thinking about moving to Tampa Bay or you're already halfway packed, this video is gonna save you a lot of time, money, frustration, and a few hard lessons we had to learn along the way. And if we've never met before, a little over 6 years ago, my wife Kate and I sold everything we owned, packed up our family of 5, and moved 1,200 miles south here to the Tampa Bay area. Since then, we've helped over 100 families do the same. But before all that, and before we were quote unquote the experts, before we had this process, we were just another family trying to figure it out. So today, I want to rewind the clock a little bit and walk you through what we do differently if we were moving to Tampa Bay again. Now, the very first thing we would have done differently is spend more time on the ground before making that purchase. Now, I'm going to give you guys the backstory here because we actually did a lot of research, but we were pretty spread out. And when I mean pretty spread out, I mean literally across the state. When we first started our search, we were relying heavily on, Google as an example. And we had a pretty good idea where we wanted to live. My father-in-law lives on the Atlantic side in the Port St. Lucie area. He's been in Florida for 25 years. My wife's been going there since she was a child. And we've been visiting him for the last decade. And for almost 10 years, we thought we were going to live in maybe Jensen Beach or Stewart on the Atlantic side. But we honestly, outside of just going there and spending time with family, we really hadn't explored anywhere else in Florida. We didn't do any research. We were just like, here's where family is, we're going to go there. And I think a lot of people do that. But we had the option to move anywhere in the state that we wanted to. Now, I'm in real estate, so I wanted to be, very cognizant of what my opportunities were going to be. So I started looking at things like job growth, the age of the community, because for years I'd always heard that Florida was God's retirement, room, and that's only old people went there. But being in the state and spending time here, I knew that wasn't true. So when I started doing our homework, we started to see areas like Jacksonville that were growing. And Jacksonville was really being fueled at that point by medical, which was great. And the city was fairly young, I would say, compared to other areas in the state, but it wasn't quite right. When we went there in January and explored it, we spent 4 days, we got an Airbnb, and we really kicked around the town and tried to get a sense of, would this community support our ideal lifestyle? And what we found was it really felt like Southern Georgia to us. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but for us, we were relocating from gray, dreary, long winters, and we were in search of sunshine. We wanted to make sure we got it right. And to be quite fair, the palm tree to pine tree ratio in Jacksonville just wasn't working for us. We wanted to make sure that we saw palms every day, all day. So we ended up crossing it off the list. And while it was a wonderful city, it just wasn't right for us and our young family at that point. We went to Deltona, which is a suburb of Orlando, a little bit closer to the coast in between Daytona Beach and Orlando. And it really felt like a suburban kind of settle for us anyways. Now, I'm not saying Deltona's not a nice area, but for us, we're beach babies. We couldn't imagine moving all the way to Florida and not having a beach in our backyard, which is the same reason why we ended up crossing off Orlando. We're not park people. We have been to Disney, we have been to Universal, and they're a great time, but it's not something that drives us on a daily basis. We don't go annually. We're not park pass holders. It's not a thing for our family. And I know people that are, and they love it. But again, for us, we wanted palm trees, white sand, and to really live that lifestyle. And I realize we're sharing a lot about our story, and forgive me, this is about you, but what I want you to understand is why we made some of these mistakes, but also how we ended up in a great position. So that's what the intent of this video is. So, again, Orlando wasn't really it. The traffic there was insane already at that point. We're talking about, January of 2017, 2018 when we started doing that shopping, and it just wasn't a good fit. And honestly, Tampa Bay was one of the last ones on the list. We considered Cape Coral and Fort Myers for a second, but when you looked at the median age, it was a lot older than we were at that point. I mean, I was turning 40, so it's not like I was a spring chicken when we moved down here, but my youngest was 5 months old, and we weren't looking to move to a retirement community, not quite yet. So these are things you got to keep in mind as you're looking through it. So when it came to the shopping, we were spending 2 or 3 days in each one of these areas, but we weren't really getting a good feel for it. But when we made it over to Tampa Bay, we knew it started to feel different in a surprising way. So we wanted to give it the time that it needed and really buckle down. So we scheduled another trip to come back down in September. We knew it was gonna be hot, so we really wanted to take a look at, some of the hottest times of the year and, just kind of explore the area, if you will. And what we didn't do was actually live a day in the life of the neighborhoods we were considering. Now, we weren't even sure of those neighborhoods yet, and this is part of the challenge when you're starting the process early, right? Because you're on things like Google and blogs, and you're trying to figure out what areas, match your ideal lifestyle, or maybe you vacationed. And listen, how something feels during vacation is not how it's gonna feel when you live there. Maybe you're on portal sites and you're looking at houses and you're like, wow, that's a beautiful home, but we had no context for what that actually meant. And it's really hard to get a sense for what a place is going to feel like until you're there during things like rush hour, school pickup, or when it rains sideways. These things are important. So if we're gonna do this all over again, we'd book a few days and make sure we dialed in the exact neighborhoods we were considering, not just the city. The city's one thing, right? A lot of cities have a lot of great areas all across the country, so that's not really hard to do. But once you dial into the neighborhoods, that's when you wanna really start kicking the tires and live like a local, if you will. You wanna go to the grocery store. Publix is a great example. Not many people go to a grocery store except for the people who live in a community. Once you get on the beach, that's different because you have so many tourists, but in the surrounding neighborhoods, that's not real life. Most people who are in the grocery store live there. Go to the parks, okay? Go to the school lines. What do they look like? What does traffic feel like during those peak hours? These are things that you want to know. Go to the parks, walk the trails, sit at a local coffee shop and ask people about their experiences. You want to live not as a tourist, but as a potential local. That's really how you want to think about this. And I know this not only from our move and the mistakes we made, but helping over 100 families relocate to the area. The one thing that we point out all the time is you really want to come in and live like a local and community shop, because once you get the community right, the houses actually are really easy to find from that point. And I know I just mentioned lifestyle, and here's why it's important, because we would have picked lifestyle over square footage if we were to do it all over again. Now, don't get me wrong. We love our home. And if you guys have been following our journey, which we're going to get into later, we're going to share some of the challenges about what our home has faced because of the storms and where we are. However, coming from the Midwest, we were used to big yards, quiet cul-de-sacs, and basements, which we don't have here anymore. So when we saw a 4-bedroom home with a pool and a pretty decent yard and not too far away from the Gulf, we jumped on the opportunity. But we were so focused on the house, we forgot to ask, what is our actual day-to-day life here going to look and feel like? And here's why, because a big kitchen doesn't really matter much if you're spending 2 hours a day in a car, right? The schools are too far away from where you work or where you live. That's gonna be a challenge, if there aren't enough parks or walkable coffee shops, or if that's important to you. You could feel pretty isolated even though the house is beautiful and the community is beautiful. So if we're gonna do it all over again, we'd actually take a little less space just so we could have more experience and more lifestyle to us. And honestly, we love our house, but if we had to give up a bedroom or the family room versus the living room and only have one and move, a quarter mile closer to the beach or a half a mile closer to the beach, I'd do it tomorrow, and I think Kate would too. If we could just walk out of the house and walk to the beach, we can do it now, but it's about 20 minutes, which isn't the end of the world. We love where we live, but with young kids, that can be a challenge. If you're a half mile, you can throw them in the little trailer on the bike or carry them. There's way more access to life there. And again, this is very specific to us, but I want you to think about you. What's important to you, your family's lifestyle? Because honestly, that is the most important thing when it comes to relocating, is making sure that you are getting the correct area that matches that ideal lifestyle. Now, the third one on this list, I have seen it just absolutely crush some of our clients, right? And it hasn't affected me as much, but I'll tell you what, there are days when I'm like, oh my goodness. And this is about the traffic, right? And the reality of traffic versus what you read on Google. Because when you first look at Tampa Bay, everything seems fairly close, downtown, the beach, the airport. It all looks like it's, 30 minutes, 40 minutes away. But the reality of it is, once, peak drive times hit, like the morning commute and the afternoon commute hit, these drive times you see, when you're Googling at 8 o'clock at the night, just go right out the window. And, we've had clients that have moved into the state, have moved into the area, and they do cross-town commutes to work. And I've had clients call me and say, well, it takes me an hour and a half to get to work. And while I would not have chose that for everybody, some people make those decisions, but I'm here to tell you, whatever that traffic says right there, right now, when you pull up either Apple Maps or Google Maps, you need to adjust your expectations. If you are going to be school time, work time commutes, those things are going to be longer than what it says on there. And why I'm drilling down on this is because, I know it's easy for us to look online on Zillow and Realtor and Redfin, and you see these beautiful homes and you're like, man, I'll live out a little bit further, to get this really nice house, not recognizing how much time you're going to sacrifice away from your family or home or just a sense of peace. And here's the big thing that I tell people, not all 40-minute commutes are created equal. Okay, a 40-minute leisurely drive to the office is way different than white knuckling bumper to bumper traffic. Isn't that fair? And it's different for everybody. Some people love to be on the road. I don't mind the drive, but we live so close to the water here, we have to go drive to clients and we're out in areas like Wesley Chapel, or I'm going to Lithia, at peak drive times, that can take me an hour and 30 minutes to get back home, which is crazy because I can make it out to Wesley Chapel in the morning, as long as I leave after the morning commute in 50 minutes. But, I'm coming back at 5:30 or 6 o'clock at night after we show clients houses, and now all of a sudden it takes an hour and a half, which is just wild. We have clients who live in Wesley Chapel, and, if you look on the map, it shows 35 minutes to downtown, but their reality is 50 minutes every single day. So keep that in mind. If you are fortunate enough to work from home where this isn't a problem, awesome. But if you do have to drive to the office, make sure you're setting yourself up. When it comes to Tampa Bay, I don't know about any other area in this country. Here's what I know. You don't want to do a cross-town commute, meaning you don't want to live on the east side of Tampa and have to work on the west side. That is not an ideal scenario for you or anyone in your family, because it's going to definitely put some pressure at home. If your significant other is waiting at home with the kids, while you're in the car just all fed up, and you're going to get home and just bring that in the house, it can be tough, y'all. So just keep it in mind, traffic reality versus what traffic shows on Google, because they are two different things. Now, the next one here, it's pretty personal. And this happened to us because, honestly, we didn't ask all the questions. And I think it's fair because when you don't live in an area your entire life, you don't know all the questions you need to ask. And even though I had sold real estate for 7 years, I lived in the Great Lakes state and was by water, we had very few areas that were really impacted by flooding. Whether that was through rainwater or living too close to a lake, that just wasn't a common thing because of the amount of rain we got in Michigan. It rained hard, but nothing like it rains down here in Florida. And, we got this great house again, 4 bedrooms, pool, close to the water. It's our dream home, to be honest with you guys. Yeah, could we imagine ourselves living on a stilted home on the Gulf? Yes, but that wasn't a reality for us, just like it's not for most people. So this was our dream, and we made it happen. And we got a great place. We're not in a flood zone. So, we're in flood zone X technically, which means we don't have to carry flood insurance. And our house is 43 feet above sea level. So I thought we were making a great decision, y'all. I mean, who else in their right mind doesn't think that that's good, right? Like, okay, cool. I'm elevated. I'm not in danger of storm surge. I don't have to pay flood insurance. It's optional to me. All of those things check out. My home is block, right? So it's built really well to last. All of these things are good. Checking the boxes. But what I didn't think to ask, right? What I didn't even know to ask is, what is my neighbor's elevation? Because what I found out when we got 12 inches of rain in 6 hours when Hurricane Milton came through was our home in our neighborhood was the lowest house. And it doesn't matter how high you are, right? You can be on top of a mountain, but if you're in the valley on top of the mountain, guess who's getting wet? And our home, if you've watched any of our videos, was damaged during Hurricane Milton. We've just got back in the house after 7.5 months of renovating and rehabbing the home. We're very grateful, and now I carry flood insurance. And more importantly, we are mitigating all of the water challenges we've had. And our home didn't flood per se because of the storm. It flooded because of rainwater, and it was washing down from my neighbors who are 3 feet behind us, because in the 70s, you could, one neighbor and one neighborhood could be higher than the other. They don't do that today. Today they use GPS and lasers to make sure everybody's level. That way one neighbor's not flooding the other. But my home was built in 1972, and they did not do that back then. So I got a neighbor that's higher on the right side, neighbor that's higher on the back, and in the back, and the neighbor that's higher on the left. And what happened was our house got wet. So when you go to buy your property, okay, the county does an excellent job of keeping track of the records of your elevation, but it also keeps track of your neighbors. So that is one thing that I completely recommend. Stay out of flood zones. The best thing for you to do is, if you cannot afford to completely renovate your house in cash, do not buy a home in a flood zone, because while you may have insurance, it could take months. There are still people, 8 months later, waiting on insurance checks. You don't want that to be you. So again, stay out of flood zones. Those suburbs that I was talking about earlier, areas like Wesley Chapel and Land O'Lakes and Odessa and Lithia and Parrish, those areas, these new construction development they build, are typically out of flood zones. Now, you ask a great agent or a great realtor, they'll help you through the process. And if you need that help, please feel free to reach out to the team here, because that's what we do. We help people just like you buy, sell, relocate, and invest all over the area. And I'm very happy to say that none of our clients were affected by that storm. Only us. But I want to make sure that I wear the scar and I give you the lesson, and not the other way around. So we got to be careful of elevation, of water runoff, flood zones. All of those things matter. And if you want more information about that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We can point you in the right direction and then help you dial it in from there. Now, here's another thing that if we had a chance to go back and do it again, we would. Right? Because the first 18 months of living here in Tampa Bay were a roller coaster. The first 6 months, we were basically on vacation. We moved down in December of 2018, and I got to work from home at that point. I wasn't even selling real estate in Florida yet. I was still selling real estate back in Michigan, and we essentially got to live like a little vacation. I'm not saying we didn't work. I just didn't have to go to an office. But I got to spend, the mornings reading and having my baby sleep on my stomach out on the lanai. I mean, it was just an awesome time. So we really kind of put our head down. And then as we started to venture outside of our little bubble, because we love the weather and we were going to the beach and the lifestyle and all those things that we moved here for, what we weren't doing is seeking out other people, right? And really digging into the community. And that's where we got ourselves in trouble, because not too long after we moved here, the entire world shuts down, for a year and a half essentially, and it took a long time for us to make those connections. Now, not everybody does that, but what we did discover was that there were a lot of people here that were similar to us. They had either just moved down and were going through what we were going through, moved down a few years ago and were going through what we were going through, or moved down a decade ago. And what a blessing, because they were very welcoming. And if we could go back and do it again, we would have definitely tried to plug in earlier. I mean, every time we go to a park in the area, there's always a family, and they're always super kind, like, hey, where are you from? And that's a question that people ask all the time when you live here. And the reason they ask is because most people aren't from here. Now, I know that there's a lot of Floridians, that watch our videos too, and they don't necessarily love that. But here's what I'm gonna share from my experience, y'all. This community has been overwhelmingly accepting of not only our family, but the families we've moved into the area. And there's a huge bond between them in their communities and their neighborhoods. It's so much fun to see. One of the clients that when they moved here, they sent me a photo of their daughter, playing with their friends right in the cul-de-sac in their neighborhood. And she thanked us. She was like, this is what we were hoping for. And that felt so good. And now we've got a wonderful community that we're plugged into. And, we want to make sure that our client's journey, is is with the least amount of stress, with the most amount of experience possible, and really provide an opportunity for you to enjoy where you live. Because honestly, the reality is if you don't love where you live, right, you're going to take away from that community. But if you absolutely are happy and excited and love the place where you live, then you're going to pour into that community. And those blessings make a huge difference to everybody who lives here, myself included. So selfishly, we want you guys to get it right because we know that you're going to add to the community and not take away from it. And these are all very, very difficult things to kind of go through. So if you got more questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. So here's the list of what we would do different and if I was starting over. Okay, so the first thing is I would get on the ground and explore neighborhoods intentionally. We call this community shopping, okay? You should prioritize lifestyle over square footage if those two things end up being the deciding factor. Test the traffic, don't just trust the apps. This one is a killer for a lot of people. Ask the hard questions about flood risk in the community or the areas that you're looking in. And don't wait to find your people. The good news is we've learned all of this, okay? And we share it with every single client we work with, so you don't have to learn it the hard way. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me and the team. All of my contact information is listed down below. There's even a link to my calendar, so you can schedule a time that's most convenient for you. I'm happy to jump on a Zoom call, walk you guys through the area, and show you where those pitfalls are so you don't fall in the gutter, so to speak, and make sure that you have the best experience possible. Now, YouTube's gonna put 2 more videos up here that it knows you're going to love and that will help you with your journey. And as always, and until next time, go out and live that Tampa life.